I learned to waltz in a kitchen that smelled like coffee and old wood, my feet stepping on his toes more times than I can count, while he hummed songs I didn't recognize and told me I'd need this someday. He never said for who. He never said it would be for her funeral. My grandfather was the kind of man who knew things, not book things, though he read plenty. He knew when the rain was coming by the way the leaves turned their backs to the wind. He knew how to fix anything with duct tape and patience. And he knew, somehow, that his awkward teenage grandson would one day need to know how to hold someone properly and move them across a floor like it mattered. I was 15 when the lesson started. It was summer, the kind of humid July evening where the air sits heavy on your skin and even the crickets sound tired. I'd come over to help him organize his garage, which was code for me playing on my phone while he did all the work and told me stories. But that night he had different plans. "Come inside," he said, wiping his hands on a rag that had seen better decades. "I want to show you something." I followed him into the kitchen, expecting maybe a new gadget he'd picked up at the hardware store, or another one of his elaborate theories about why the government was hiding the recipe for truly good coffee. Instead, he walked to an old radio on the counter, the kind with actual dials and an antenna, and turned it on. Static crackled, then resolved into something orchestral and ancient. "Give me your phone," he said. "What? Why?" "Because you're going to learn something useful and you can't do it while staring at a screen." I handed it over, suspicious. He pocketed it and then, to my absolute horror, held out his hand like we were in some kind of period drama. "Grandpa, what are you doing?" "Teaching you to dance, come on." "I'm not dancing with you, that's weird." He laughed, the sound coming from deep in his chest. "It's only weird if you make it weird. This is a skill, son, like changing a tire or cooking a decent meal. You'll thank me later." I didn't believe him, but I also knew that once my grandfather decided something was happening, resistance was futile. So I took his hand, my palm already sweating with embarrassment, even though we were the only ones there. "Right hand here," he said, positioning my hand on what would be a partner's shoulder blade. "Left hand holds hers like this, not too tight, not too loose. You're guiding, not grabbing. Big difference." "Whose hand am I holding? I don't even have a girlfriend." "You will, and when you do, when it matters, you'll know how to make her feel like she's floating. Now the waltz is simple. Box step, forward side together, back side together. Feel the rhythm. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. My feet felt like they belonged to someone else, someone who had never successfully walked in a straight line. I stepped on his foot immediately. "That's fine," he said, not even flinching. "Again, listen to the music, it's telling you when to move." We practiced for an hour that night, then the next night, and the night after that. It became our thing that summer. I'd show up, we'd do whatever project he had in mind, and then we'd clear a space in the kitchen and dance. He'd put on records, old vinyl he kept in milk crates, and teach me different styles. Waltz, foxtrot, a simple swing. He taught me how to lead without pushing, how to read my partner's balance, how to make someone feel safe in my arms. "Why are you teaching me this?" I asked one night after I'd finally managed an entire song without catastrophic failure. He was quiet for a moment, looking out the window at his backyard where fireflies were starting their evening performance. "Because I taught your father and he taught your mother, and that's how I knew he'd take care of her. A man who can dance can listen. He can be gentle. He can lead without dominating. Those are rare things, son, rarer than you'd think." I didn't fully understand then. I was 15 and immortal and couldn't imagine a world where any of this would actually matter. But I kept showing up, kept learning, kept stepping on his toes less and less, until finally one evening in late August, we danced a full waltz without a single mistake. "There," he said, grinning with pride. "Now you're ready." "For what?" "For someday." I went back to school, back to my life of homework and video games and trying to figure out who I was. The dancing became a fond, slightly embarrassing memory, something I'd tell people about at parties if the conversation got weird enough. Yeah, my grandpa taught me to ballroom dance in his kitchen. It was a whole thing. Years passed. I went to college, got a job, moved to a different city. I visited when I could, holidays and long weekends, and every time I did, Grandpa would clear a space in the kitchen and make me dance at least one song with him. "Can't let you get rusty," he'd say. It became our ritual, our way of staying connected across the distance. Then I met Sarah. It was at a wedding, actually, which in retrospect feels almost too perfect. I was standing at the bar, trying to decide if I wanted to be social or just drink and watch, when she appeared next to me with the kind of smile that makes you forget what you were thinking about. "You look like you're plotting an escape," she said. "Is it that obvious?" Only to someone else who's considering the same thing. I'm Sarah. "David." We talked through the entire cocktail hour, one of those conversations where you lose track of time because you're actually interested in what the other person is saying. She was funny and sharp and had this way of tilting her head when she listened that made you feel like you were the most fascinating person in the room. Then the dancing started. The bride and groom did their first dance, and then the DJ opened it up to everyone else. I saw Sarah glance at the dance floor with something that looked like longing mixed with resignation. "Want to dance?" I asked, before I could talk myself out of it. She looked surprised. "You dance?" "I do. Fair warning, I learned from my grandfather in his kitchen, so if this is terrible, blame him." She laughed and took my hand, and we walked onto the floor just as the music shifted to something slow and classical, a waltz. Of course it was a waltz. I positioned my hands the way Grandpa taught me, feeling the old muscle memory click into place. Right hand on her shoulder blade, not too high, not too low, left hand holding hers, gentle but confident. And then we moved, and it was like every awkward lesson in that coffee-scented kitchen had been preparing me for exactly this moment. Sarah fit perfectly in my arms. She followed my lead naturally, and I realized with a jolt that Grandpa had been right. This wasn't just about the steps, it was about communication without words. It was about making someone feel safe and valued and like they mattered. We danced through the entire song, and when it ended, she looked up at me with wonder in her eyes. "Where did you learn to dance like that?" "I told you, my grandfather's kitchen." "Remind me to thank him someday." I called Grandpa the next day to tell him about Sarah, about the wedding, about how his weird insistence on teaching me to dance had actually paid off. He laughed that deep laugh of his and said, "Told you you'd need it someday. You bringing her by to meet me?" "If she sticks around, definitely." "She'll stick around. You know how to hold her, right?" Sarah and I dated for 2 years before I proposed. I did it in my apartment, which I'd cleared of furniture to create a makeshift dance floor. I put on the same kind of music Grandpa used to play, and I asked her to dance, and halfway through the song, I asked her to marry me. She said yes before I even finished the question. We got married the following spring. Grandpa was there, of course, sitting in the front row with tears in his eyes that he pretended were from allergies. During the reception, during our first dance, I looked over and saw him watching us with the kind of satisfaction that comes from seeing your work completed. After Sarah and I finished, I walked over and extended my hand to him. "May I have this dance?" He stood up slowly, his joints not quite what they used to be, and took my hand. We danced a simple waltz right there in the middle of my wedding reception, and I realized I was taller than him now. When had that happened? When had he gotten smaller, older, more fragile? "You did good, son," he said quietly. "She's special. You hold on to her." "I will, and Grandpa, thank you for the lessons, for everything." That's what grandfathers are for, teaching you the things you'll need before you know you need them. That was 3 years ago. 3 years of marriage and life and all the beautiful mundane moments that make up a shared existence. Sarah and I would dance sometimes in our own kitchen, and I'd tell her stories about learning from Grandpa, about how patient he was with my clumsy teenage feet, about how he always knew this was important even when I didn't. Then, last month, my phone rang at 2 in the morning. It was my father. Grandpa had had a stroke, a bad one. By the time I got to the hospital, he was already gone. The funeral was planned for the following week. Traditional service, burial next to Grandma, who'd passed when I was too young to remember her. My father asked if I'd say something, a eulogy, but I couldn't find the words. How do you summarize a man who taught you to fix things and dance and see the world as something worth paying attention to? The night before the funeral, Sarah found me in our kitchen, standing in the space where we usually danced, just staring at nothing. "Hey," she said softly, "you okay?" I don't know how to say goodbye to him. She walked over and wrapped her arms around me. We stood like that for a long moment, and then she pulled back slightly and held out her hand. "Dance with me." "Sarah, I don't think I can." "Yes, you can, because he taught you how. Because this is what he gave you. Dance with me, David." She put on music from her phone, something slow and gentle, and I took her hand because I didn't know what else to do. We moved through our kitchen, the same box step Grandpa had drilled into me 1,000 times. Forward, side, together, back, side, together, 1, 2, 3. And as we danced, I understood something I hadn't before. He'd taught me this for her, yes, but not just for her. He'd taught me this for every moment when words wouldn't be enough. For every time I'd need to hold someone and communicate love and safety and presence through something more than language. He'd taught me how to be there for people, how to lead them gently through the hard moments, how to make them feel less alone. The funeral was beautiful in the way sad things can be beautiful. People told stories about Grandpa, about his kindness and his quirks, and his unexpected wisdom. When it came time for me to speak, I walked to the front and looked out at everyone gathered there. "My grandfather taught me to waltz," I said, "in his kitchen when I was 15 and thought it was the stupidest thing in the world. He never told me why, exactly, just said I'd need it someday, and he was right, but not in the way I expected." I told them about the lessons, about his patience, about meeting Sarah in our first dance. I told them about dancing at my wedding and seeing his face, proud and satisfied. And then I told them the truth that I'd only just figured out. He taught me to dance because he was teaching me how to love, how to be present, how to guide without controlling, how to hold someone like they matter. Those lessons weren't just about steps and rhythm. They were about being the kind of man who shows up, who pays attention, who makes people feel safe. That was who he was, and that's what he gave me. After the service, after the burial, after everyone had said their condolences and drifted away, Sarah and I were the last ones at the cemetery. The sun was setting, painting everything in shades of gold and purple, and she looked at me with a question in her eyes. "One more dance?" she asked. There was no music except the wind in the trees and the distant sound of traffic. But I took her hand anyway, positioned us properly, and we danced a waltz on the grass next to my grandfather's grave. We danced for him, for the lessons he'd given me, for the man he'd helped me become. Forward, side, together, back, side, together, 1, 2, 3. I understand now why he never told me who I'd need this for. Because it wasn't for one person or one moment, it was for all of them. For Sarah on our first date and at our wedding, for my mother at her birthday party when Dad's back hurt too much to dance, for my sister at her graduation when she needed to feel celebrated, for every moment when someone needed to be held and guided and reminded that they weren't alone. He taught me to dance, but really, he taught me to care, And now, whenever Sarah and I clear space in our kitchen and put on old records, whenever we move through those familiar steps, I feel him there. In the rhythm, in the gentle guidance, in the understanding that some of the most important things we do for each other require no words at all. Just presence, just attention, just the willingness to hold someone properly and help them move through whatever music life is playing. He was right. I needed it someday. I need it still. And someday, if I'm lucky, I'll have a grandchild of my own, and I'll teach them to waltz in my kitchen, and I'll tell them they'll need it someday too. I'll never say for who, because the answer is everyone. Everyone who needs to be held, to be led, to be reminded that someone cares enough to learn their rhythm and move with them through it. That's what he gave me. That's what I'll pass on. One box step at a time. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, forever.